Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet. And joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler of Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island and Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky of Anshe Chesed in New York City. It's great to see you. We are recording this on day 468 of the war, 468 of the hostages. It's the day that a hostage agreement was announced. We're approaching this with both concern, anguish, but a little bit of anticipation and hope that they will come home. This we only have that choice. It's mandatory to have hope at this point for the remaining hostages who are alive. We are thinking about them, praying for them as always for that they should be protected and guarded in health, knowing that they're going to come back forever changed. We have been
Can't
watching
even imagine, cannot even imagine
the
what kind of, I mean,
exactly,
what kind
and
of psychological, emotional, spiritual help
it's
they're gonna.
anguish. The whole country, you can see we are feeling this, from these
I mean,
distances.
to give you a, I spend a lot of today watching Israeli news and just holding my breath and hanging on every word. And there was I thought, I mean, I know that the far right has referred to this as a capitulation to Hamas, and you should not stop until there was a complete unconditional surrender, just like the United States vis-a-vis Germany and Japan and whatever. But I know that the far right feels that way. I know that there were some demonstrations against the deal, but even on the Khan network, which I watch just more to the left, there was a guy who said that if they don't all come back, more or less immediately, we're going to create whatever number he used, X many Ron Aradim. And you remember that Ron Arad was shot down
Yes,
in the 80s and never returned. And that's a scar on the Israeli psyche.
absolutely.
And this whole 468 days has just been a scar on the national psyche of these poor people. And the number of, the thought that we're still talking about Hadar Golden, and he was killed in 2014, right? So they just were looking for his body to come back.
It's
So,
just there's anguish on all in every respect here. We want them back, and I don't think there's any way that anybody could go on. The country has been really in an emotional state of paralysis with these hostages. So we're mindful. We're thinking it occupies a lot of our bandwidth, and we are also witnessing, this unfolding catastrophe in real time in the West Coast with the desolation that we're seeing, and we know that we have people watching us all over the country, and even in Los Angeles, in that area, in California, and our hearts go out to them, to the communities that have been really, I mean, obliterated, destroyed. And will take who knows how to recover. I mean, we were reflecting on this. My synagogue had a fire in 2006, and we rebuilt our synagogue 3 years later. And wow, what a great, beautiful synagogue we have! But it was, half a building, and six fire engines came, and they put it out over the space of, I don't know, 8 to 12 hours, and it didn't spread beyond, half a block. And we're talking about an area that is 10 times the size of my community, my 10, 20, who knows how many. I mean, thousands and thousands of acres. And so we're thinking
and
about them
you know,
also. And
so,
we're
and by the way,
yes,
um, we're going to talk about another thing that's burning in a few minutes.
the
Good
bush.
segue.
The burning bush.
Snap, a
The
snap.
burning bush. I was gonna give a nod and a wink to the epoch-making moment of transition in this country, but I think most people would rather talk about the epoch moment of the transition between Genesis and Exodus than.
Yeah.
But may it be for blessing. That's all I'll say in terms of our epochs here. Uh, and Shmot is beginning. We are starting this new book, and we're in a different world. We're in Egypt. We're with a different set of people, set of characters. We have the same God, and the same promise. And we are meeting this extraordinary character Moses. So we're gonna kind of fast forward through some of the early stories, the birth of Moses, his rescue from the Nile in a basket lined with pitch, his adoption by the Pharaoh's daughter, and he grows up among Egyptians. Can we just dip into this debate about Moses going out to his brethren, Vayar B'sivlotam? Just remind me the verses, chapter 2, verse
11,
11.
11.
Vayhi bayamim hahem vayigdal Moshe. It was in those days, and he grew up. Vayetzel lechav, and he goes to his brothers. And my traditional reading of this, or is he goes to because he has an awareness. He's aware that he is differentiated from the pharaonic court. He is, he has he looks different. He has a big nose. He talks with his hands. He has dark hair. He's, he
Swarthy complexion.
he ends every sentence with a question, right? And and he goes and he sees his brothers. His brothers are, I'm going to just say anachronistically, Jews. He goes among his Jewish brothers. And Rabbi Dr. Eben Ezra says something different. Rabbi Kierma Kamenovsky, could you quote?
Yeah. So Ibn Ezra, one of the great Bible commentators from medieval Spain, he lived in the latter 11th and into the 12th century. He is of all crazy things. He is buried of all crazy things in England because he was tremendously unsuccessful in business and life, and went into exile. He was in Italy. He was in France. He's actually mentioned once in the Tosafot. He met Rabbeinu Tam, and he died in England. He's a tremendous, tremendous poet, wonderful, wonderful poet, and also great Bible commentator. And he says that when Moses goes out, I'm in the wrong chapter. It's
Chapter 2, verse 11.
chapter
Right?
2, verse 11. Oh, I'm in chapter 1, verse 11. Let me scoot it ahead. Sorry, right there. And there it was over many days that Moses goes out to see his brethren, Vayetzei el Achav, Vayar b'sivlotam, to see their
Suffering,
labors.
labor.
But wait, I'm gonna go
Okay.
back on. I'm gonna change that
Yeah.
differently. Vayar ish mitzri maka ish echav, and he sees an Egyptian man beating beating a Hebrew man from among his brothers. You see the word echav appears twice in the sentence. He goes out to see his brothers and their sivlot, and then he sees one of his brothers, Echav, his Hebrew brothers, being beaten. Ibn Ezra offers, and I don't know that he's trying to get at, but he offers us a reading that gives us a wonderful picture of Moses' own divided consciousness, exactly as we said that Moses, he doesn't quite fit into Egypt, but he has grown up as Pharaoh's adopted grandson, and he's got to have a divided consciousness. So Ibn Ezra offers that when he goes out to see his brothers, it is to see the Egyptians, and to see their sivlotam, to see their burden. It probably means that he wants to see how the work is going. They're building pyramids, they're doing whatever they're doing, and he has some level of identification with the Egyptians, and he sees the Egyptian man beating one of Echav, his brother Hebrews. So I have to say that I don't really think this is that likely. I kind of prefer the other reading because I think that we Jewish audience, when we hear his brothers, we're getting a story of Moses' identification with the people, and it's our people. And so I do kind of prefer that. But the heterodoxy of this reading, that the first brothers is the Egyptian brothers and the second brothers is the Hebrew brothers, that just really seems a brilliant
So
insight into a divided character.
yeah, I'm inclined, I agree with everything. And here I'll just put, in the kind of word of appreciation for Ebenezer and word of appreciation for you offering the comment, because what it does, it says, look, you think, I mean, I say this all the time, you think you know this. You think you're so committed to your own interpretation. Here comes some guy and says, you let's stretch the bound, let's stretch your imagination here. What if you read this differently? What kind of interpretation, what kind of story are you getting? And you're getting precisely a story that is inside here, which is this is a story about a man and his identity. And a man and his identity is going to be on one day he's an Egyptian, on another day he's an Israelite, and one day he doesn't know what he is, and he's a young man. And so what we expect, I mean, I'm projecting a certain kind of adolescent anxiety on this person, but in if we were to enter into the inner world of Moses, he's got to be asking himself, who am I? Who am I? I mean, and that's the great, existential question. And it's a great literary question. Who am I? I keep thinking of, Les Miserables. Of course, he's Jean Valjean. He has to realize who he is. He has to, and this is the moment where he has to assert his identity. So you could even say that within that verse itself, we're going from one set of brothers to another set of brothers. And I think that that's what Ibn Ezra is bringing out here, that he has allegiances. Of course, he's grown up in the Pharaonic household. How could he not be Egyptian? But how can he not be Israelite? Because he remembers his mother singing to him as she was breastfeeding him, as she was
Oifen
nursing
Pripacek.
him.
She's saying Oifen Pripacek.
Often Pripacek, he has the memory that's in his DNA. And so aroused by his sense of justice, or what can you Zapruder this moment, please, for us? Take us frame by frame as he slays the Egyptian. Okay, we've done it before, but it's irresistible. This text, Vayar ish mitzrima ke ish yivim echav. Now he realizes that this is the victim is a brother. Vayifen kovacho. He looks this way and that way. Vayar ki ein ish. He sees that there's no one there. Vayachet mitzri, and he smites the Egyptian. Vayitmeneo bachol, and he buries him in the sand. Is the smiting of the Egyptian a murder or manslaughter? We've talked about this in the past, but this is what he does. He does it out of an aroused sense of protection and justice and defense of the victim. And that's who Moses is. That's at least in our first scene here of who he is. He's a person motivated by a strong desire to
Right.
protect.
It's the first time that he chooses sides.
Yes.
And it's never quite clear how to understand that line that he looked here and there and did not see a man. But perhaps what it meant is that he saw that the Egyptian was not treating the Israelite as a human being,
Yeah.
and Moses defended him.
Nice.
This
Very
leads
nice.
This
Very
leads
nice.
this leads to his having to run into exile. And in exile in Midian, he again has his protective instinct aroused when he sees these women harassed at the well. He
So
protects them, and then he
I
marries
think
one.
what it reminds us of, I think, is that there is an element of the uncivilized in the building of Israelite religion. Right? Because one can ask, why did not Moses receive the revelation in Egypt? Which is a question that they ask in the Mechilta at the beginning. And I think that part of the reason is that Egypt is identified with a kind of stasis, right? The great symbol of Egypt is the pyramid, which, as we know, lasts forever. And our encounters with God, on the other hand, are fleeting. They're not permanent. And
Mhm.
therefore, he must leave Egypt in order to find God and then bring that idea of God back to the people and reinvigorate them and refresh their souls to be a little more modern than the Bible, perhaps, with this new image of the divine.
But he
I,
goes,
I like
you know,
I like
to,
what you
to no
said
man's
about
land. Yes, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, no, I think that's first of all, I think it's amazing. I love that comment that there is no man. We who have a recollection of the dehumanization of the Shoah, and just I'll let all of the many listeners fill in the blanks about the events of the last year and a half, and other parts of societies in Israel and America that we love, where people can be treated as less than human. Um, this is what Moses is resisting. And I love, Elliot, you also just observed he's building his powers of intervention. He's going to intervene when a brutal taskmaster is killing somebody. He's going to intervene when two people are fighting against each other. He's going to intervene in these people he's never met in his life. I mean, the Egyptian, there's one Israelite involved in the first case. There's two Israelites involved in the second case. There's nobody he's ever met before. He's in the middle of the desert. He doesn't know these shepherd girls from anyone. And he's gained the power and commitment to stand up when people are being victimized.
Right. And so we find him now in exile in Midian, and he's got a flock of his father-in-law. He's got a wife. He's got at least one child that we know of, the Gershom. And then at the end of chapter 2, it tells us, "Vayihi vayemim rabim ahem," in those many days, which is a very unusual expression, Vayamot melech Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt died. And then it tells us we get a really rich description of the suffering of the Israelites. Vayinchu b'nei Israel, vayizaku. They scream, they suffer, they scream to God. Their cries go up to God. God hears, God remembers His covenant, and God sees Israel and knows. And then we have this scene. Moshe haya ro'eh etzon Yitro. Moses is shepherding the flock of Yitro. Vayinhag et hatzon achar midbar. He takes the sheep. I'm going to say achar midbar means to to the edge of the. We translate midbar as desert, and wilderness, but midbar technically is the grazing area. He takes the sheep beyond the grazing area or to the border of the grazing area. So I have in my mind a picture like not being a shepherd and not knowing much about grazing, but I know a little bit about vegetation. And you know what the tree line is? And the tundra? in
Yeah,
in
it's the
when you're
line
in
above
grade
which the trees
four
don't
in
grow.
geography in Canada, you learn that there's something called the tree line and the tundra, and that all vegetation ends. And you can, if you're in a kind of drone above this, you can see where vegetation stops. Okay, where trees stop. Okay, and that's the tree line. There is an equivalent grazing line where you know animals can't graze because it's just there's nothing there. And this is where Moses goes. Moses goes to a place beyond which there is grazing. There's the grazing boundary, the grass line, as it were. And that's where he is. And he is going there, I'm going to say, because the news of Pharaoh's death reaches him. At least the narrator tells us this. We don't have, the narrator saying, and the news reached Moses. We are assuming that the death of the Egyptian sovereign is a world historical event, and that must get known. And so here's Moses. He comes to a decision moment. And as the great rock group, The Clash said, should I stay or should I go?
Should I go now?
Right? Do I stay here and live out my life as a shepherd? I have a nice life. I can eat lots of sheep and lamb
Love lamb.
chops.
I think though, Elliot, the the words of the verse suggest that he's already committed himself, because you're reading it as I understand it that he's going past the border.
Achar.
But the verb here is hayaroeh. This is something he's been doing a lot of, right? It's not the first time that he did this, that he confronts the burning bush. It's something that happened after many times. And so I think what we could say, to switch metaphors very quickly, he's pushing the envelope, and then he'll have this fateful encounter at the burning bush.
So that
And one way to see Moses' entire career is as a boundary breaker.
yes. So he is consistently going to the edge, and this is the day that he
And
goes
then the step
beyond.
beyond, right?
And
I mean,
now
that's
this
your
is the day
point.
he goes beyond. and he sees this apparition of we translate sneh as a bush, and it could mean a lot of things. It could mean a whole ridge of fire. There's something that is visible to him in the distance. Now read closely. It says, "Vayavo el har Elohim choreva." He goes to the mountain of God to Chorev. Now this is the narrator speaking. We don't know if he knows that it's a mountain of God. He must know that it's a mountain, okay? Because you know.
That would be surprising if
I
he
would,
did.
I'll tell
Yes.
you something. Not from the world's hikers, okay? But we've had our experiences in upstate New York in the Berkshires, and we like a hike. If we see a mountain, we're liable to say, "Hey, let's go up and check it out." At least that's how I feel about it. And he goes, uh, "Vayera malach Adonai elav belabat esh." And so an angel of God appears to him, or he is seen by. Vayera means he is seen by an angel of God in a fire inside a sneh. Now, I'm going to offer this interpretation, which is this fire and this bush is a protective ridge to the mountain. There is another fire, a fiery thing that's a protection to another area. And I'm referring to the Eitz Chaim. It's Lahat HaCherev HaMitapechet. At the beginning of Breshit, we go back there, and when Adam and Eve are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and the way back to the tree of life is blocked by something fiery. And here, the mountain of God is where they're going to get the Torah. And the mountain of God is protected by something fiery. And this is Moshe who stops, but then he goes, okay? This bush is not consumed, cue the seminary logo and motto. And Moshe says, Asura navere, and this is the critical moment. I need to go down there and see. I need to go down there and see because I'm curious because I want this, because I need this, because of my identity, because. And then,
So I'm just curious why you say he's going down as opposed to going off to the side.
that's a good question. I see him on another ridge going towards the foot of the mountain, right? I have this picture, I don't know, you know, we I guess, Jeremy, remember we go to the the stone church, you know.
Yeah, very happy,
One
happy
of our
memory.
favorite hikes and Machane Ramah, the Berkshires, really the most beautiful. So I have this picture. You go up Route 22 and you stop, you park, and then you walk through what is essentially a flat area, okay? And then you hit a mountain or you hit stone, you hit a ridge, okay? And the geology is fascinating. It's all ice age geology, fascinating for a different Parsha talk, okay? But you can see the hill from above, okay? And and you go and you're basically you go inside this tiny mini canyonette, okay? There's water coming at you, and you're walking on a trail, and you're heading upwards, but you're heading to the waterfalls, basically. And just as anyone who enters into this little tiny canyon has tremendous curiosity because you hear the water, you feel things moving, and there's some, you know that there's a destination, okay? So we have experience. I hope our camp viewers and listeners appreciate this. We used to go there for early morning, shacharit, and we used to make a picnic, and there was just a field right before you enter. That's my vision of this. That before there's a flat area, there's a field, and then you go into the canyon, and before that, there's this fire. And the fire's not letting you go through, right? But you want to get to the other side. And that's what's happening here. Moses, he said, I want to see this because it's, first of all, there's a fire there. Second of all, there's something very peculiar about it. It's not being
So
consumed.
What do you think the significance of the bush itself is, right? There could just be a fire, one could imagine. So
I think
why is it a sneh that's on fire?
so. The snare,
Well,
we
yeah.
say it's a humble thing. Okay, go ahead, Jeremy.
I mean, I first of all, I love the place that you described, but I have a very different view because I'm thinking about what I mean. I know that the Sinai Desert is not the Dead Sea, but I'm thinking about the Dead Sea. I'm thinking about being all alone at Kumarana or something like that, or having been if at where Santa Caterina is in Sinai, the incredible majestic quality of the mountain. And I do think he has to know because remember he goes to El Har Elohim Choreva, the Choreva at the end, that little hey at the end of the word means that he's going in the direction of Chorev, like he was pursuing the experience of the mountain. And I do think that the going down part refers to the humility of the little. Otherwise, you might overlook this thorn bush. I kind of think that you know uh, perhaps this thing was on fire for a gazillion passersby, but none of them stopped to look. But Moshe is the guy who said, "Asura na, let me turn aside from what's keeping me busy. I'm thinking about my obligations. I'm thinking about my sheep, and I'm thinking about my father-in-law, and I'm thinking about all this stuff. And I want to look at this because I'm going to pay attention." But I also, I mean, I can't refrain from mentioning in the development of Israelite monotheism, in Vizot HaBracha at the very end of the Torah, uh, in the blessing for Yosef, blesses Ritzon Shochni Sneh. You be blessed for him that you will have the favor of the one who dwells in the bush. And I think that an ancient reader at some early level of Israelite monotheism, which wasn't Rambam's monotheism, there was like a sacred tree, and we have so many sacred trees because the burning bush is our menorah. The menorah is some replication of a tree on fire, and Zechariah, like for the Haftarah for Chanukah, also for Bahalotecha, the olive trees just have these kind of pipes that go straight to the menorah, and they so it's a glowing tree. This motif of a sacred tree of light is pretty, it's not ubiquitous in Judaism. It's got a bunch of examples.
So I mean, I see you and I kind of raise you, okay? I see,
Mm.
I want to raise you and say, well, this is just a premonition. I mean, it's a literary foreshadowing of the big moment. The big moment is going to be this
Sure,
mountain, this
for
very
sure.
big mountain, which is going to be a volcano mountain. The whole mountain's going to be on fire,
Right.
right?
So I wonder if the bush is not a symbol of the volcano.
Yes.
That it's kind of downhill from the volcano. You don't see the fire of the volcano only when you're on top looking in. But this
But
is
then you're in
like,
trouble because
So
then you're
yeah,
if
of
you're if
course.
you're God, okay, just pretend this. If you're God
But
and you're interview and you have a candidate to be your prophet, you wanna see if your candidate is up to this task
yeah, he has to be tested by fire, no question about it.
no, it's not only the fire, it's the ability to discern that the unbelievable, immeasurable, infinite power of God can be contained in a human vessel. That is to say, at least make connection to a human vessel.
So what I would suggest though is that it's instructive, I think that it's a fire. The three great symbols for God in the Bible, I think, are fire, a cloud, and the wind. And they're all energy sources. And what makes them so powerful as images of God is that they all have substance but no form. In other words, you can only capture the form at a moment because it's always changing. And I think perhaps what Moses is coming to understand is that this unfixed form is the path to God.
Say it again so that our viewers and listeners and the two of us can also. So fire, wind.
Fire, wind, and a cloud. Those are traditional biblical images for representations of God.
What about, okay.
Um,
Just also, I would add maybe voice. There's sound, a call.
so the difference with the voice is a voice has no substance, right? We hear it, but there's nothing we could touch. The other things we can touch, but we can't fix the form.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Maybe you'll disagree about the wind a
No, no,
little
no,
bit.
no. Right. So,
Okay, so that's why they're so evocative because it's not that God has no form, God has no fixed form.
yeah.
The
Well,
way
this is calling to mind another super famous passage which takes place in the very same spot.
with Eliyahu.
Exactly. God, Eliyahu's mad at the people and he's mad at God and the people are all faithless and I'm the only one. And God says, okay, stand up. And God comes by in a great wind, but God's not in. And there's a great wind, but God's not in the wind. There's a great earthquake, but God's not in the earthquake. There's a great fire, but God is not in the fire. And afterwards, a still small voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here there's a still small, I mean, is it a small bush or not? I don't know, but there is a voice that comes out of the sneh that says Moshe, Moshe. And I did this with my class this week, and I played the Charlton Heston, the Ten Commandments, and the
You
Prince of
played God
Egypt.
again?
I did Moshe, Moshe, and it was and in the Prince of Egypt it's Moshe, Moshe. So I wish I wish
Actually,
we had a sound.
In the Prince of Egypt, the actor who voices Moshe, Val Kilmer,
Kilmer.
is the
Yeah,
voice of that
yeah,
scene
yeah.
too, which is
So,
so. I mean, the famous midrash is that God speaks out of the bush in the voice of Moses' own father.
yeah,
Is that Amram or is that Pharaoh?
yeah,
Um, but he's trying to keep him calm or whatever. But in that scene in the movie, I mean, that's just a brilliant maneuver. He's actually hearing his own voice.
yes, that's right. And so look, so Moshe answers Hineni. It's interesting. There's a lovely midrash. Just while I mean, I'm looking at the time, we're running out of time, but lots of people in the Tanakh, have their name repeated. Avram, Avraham, Yaakov, Yaakov, Shmuel, Shmuel, Moshe, Moshe. So it's interesting. Not that I pay attention. I like to pay attention to trope, but whenever those names are repeated, Avram, Avram, Yaakov, Yaakov, Shmuel, Shmuel, there's always a pasek, right? The line between the two of them. There's no line between Moshe and Moshe, right? And so the midrash on that is that, those other individuals had some kind of break, some kind of, interruption in God's revelation. But with Moses, there's no interruption. It's a lovely little thought.
Oh, very
And
nice.
nice, nice. Moshe, Moshe. All right. So we didn't even touch the surface as usual, but the, this moment then is a moment which I'm going to say is it validates something about Moses, that God calls Moses after Moses goes towards God, so that God calls Moses as a response to Moses, right? It's
As
vayat,
a response to Moses' response. And I think that's the key is that
yeah,
Moses always responds.
yeah,
And that's why God takes note of him because he doesn't miss things that a lot of us would miss in similar situations.
yeah.
He's really attuned to what's going on and he has a response. Not always a perfect one, but he's human, but he does respond.
So once God reveals himself to Moses, go down to verse 6 for a second, and it says, Vayomer Vayomer Anochi Elohei Avicha Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov, I am the God of your father, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Vayaster Moshe Panav. Moses hides. And that's I'm haunted by that phrase because that's the phrase that God uses at the end of the Torah when he says, when you do something terrible, when you turn away from me, I will hide my face from you. And so here, the first occurrence of that is Moses hiding. He actually, conceals himself. Ki yare mehabit el Elohim. And I found this beautiful little line in Masechet Brachot, the first pages. It says, "When I wanted to show myself to you, you hid. Now you want, when later on, when God, they're at the mountain, Moses says, Hareini nakvodecha, show me your face." So it's beautiful. He says, when I wanted to show myself, you hid. And now
The
Right.
you
moment
want me to
passed.
show myself, I'm hiding.
But it's worth pointing out here, though, that the very next line is God says, Ra'o ra'iti et oni ami asher b'Mitzrayim, that you, Moshe, are hiding your face. You don't want to look at me,
That I'm seeing.
but I am seeing my people in Egypt.
It's such a great line, and maybe it's a good line to end on because it's about divine pathos. It's divine, God looking down, God looking down, in this moment that we are now entering this phase of real uncertainty in the next, few days, few weeks for Israel, for the Jewish people that we've been waiting for. This, hoping that we can you know, move through these phases. We pray that God should look down and God protect us, the people of Israel. God, especially, of course, to protect the hostages, their families, and Klal Yisrael as we go
So,
through this. Yeah, let's go.
so since you mentioned divine pathos, it gives us an opportunity to mention the late Rabbi Ram Yoshua Heschel, who marched with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in Selma, and whose birthday we'll observe on Monday along with Inauguration Day.
Amazing.
And Saturday is Heschel's Yahrzeit.
It's your side. It's your side. We've talked about
So
it.
King's birth will mark King's birthday and Heschel's Yahrzeit on the
Nice.
same weekend.
Leiluye Nishimot. Okay. Well, with that, we want to thank our viewers, our listeners for watching, for listening, for being such loyal fans, and for getting inspiration. And you know who I'm talking about. All the rabbis out there getting inspiration from this in your
You're
Chomer.
welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Shabbat
We'll see you
Shalom.
next week. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.